This is Alexandra from Perced.
And this is Paul from the Time Repair Corporation.
And we welcome you to the Interchange podcast.
A meeting of the minds, people reaching outside of themselves in an attempt for a deeper understanding of perspectives.
And it is through this coming together of perspectives that we hope to serve the divergence, the polymaths, the angels of chaos, the disruptors, the non-conforming thinkers, in short, those who do not fit in molds.
We want to achieve that by inviting those troublemakers from around the globe and digging into their experiences and unique views.
Views which we are bringing forth and supporting with models for personal, social, and sustainable change to design a system that is fit for the future. But that's not the only beautiful thing about interchange.
We want to grow that conversation for more people to be able to weigh in and contribute and actively contribute to the practical creation of tomorrow. So reach out to us and let's make this a borderless interchange.
And in our session today, we are bringing a guest from Germany. He is one of the very last people that I met face-to-face at a live event, at a live conference that was back in, I think, December 2019. So almost a year and 3 months ago, which is huge. And we were both speaking at the World Youth Forum. And since then, we kept contact. We had amazing exchanges and future collaborations. And the work that he does essentially through the enterprise that he co-founded, that is called ShiftSchool Academy, aims at disrupting mindsets. No, but he doesn't like the word mindset. So let's say disrupting states of mind and how these states of mind can really adapt to the changing world we live in and to the digital transformation that we witness. So today we are going to welcome Tobias Burkhardt. Tobias, how are you doing? How are you feeling today?
Great. It's an honor to be on your show, and I'm excited to have a great discussion with you.
And I'm positive we're going to have an amazing discussion. So I think the first thing that I want to ask, because it really sort of extracts the beautiful things and the beautiful innovations that you're coming up with these days. And I want to know for you, and based on your background, on your experiences, on your current work, what do you think are the fundamental skills or the fundamental values that we need to have in our educational experiences?
First of all, it's a good question. So thank you for asking that question. I think it's not so much about certain skills. I mean, of course, we could discuss certain skills and competencies that people need to acquire, but I truly believe in a century where the half-life of knowledge is getting shorter and shorter, and we have to learn more stuff in a short matter of time. It's more essential to have the right attitude towards learning. It's more essential to learn how to learn in order to adapt to the changes that we will all see already experiencing now, but I think it will be even more evident in the future. And so I think that is the fundamental, or the foundation of everything, is learning to learn and experience that learning is fun and fundamental and is something that lies in our nature. And if you look at kids, for example, I think they have all this intrinsic motivation to learn, and then something happens that we call school that changes that. And I think that is the most crucial thing that we have to get rid of when we talk about education for kids. And I see my job to re-educate people towards that hunger and openness to an eagerness to learn. So probably try to remotivate people into that direction. And I think that is the basis. On top, you can discuss many skills and whatever competences you want to put in there. But I think that is the fundamental basis that we all need to develop in the future.
And how is it that we learn best?
I mean, there are many factors, but I think I can only speak for adults because that's my arena. And I think the only way to learn things once you have acquired a certain thing and your neurons are wired in a certain way is through experience. So I truly believe in that cycle we have to have new experiences so that we can store them on top of the experiences that we've made. And but experience alone is not enough. We also need to reflect on the experience that we have made, and in order to compare them to the old experiences. So our brain basically tries to predict the future on the data that it has got, and that's our experiences. So we have to have new ones in order to change things. That's why I don't like the word mindset, because it's not about setting things. We want to be flexible and adaptable in the future, and that's why it's more like a state of mind that can be changed quickly and has to adapt to new conditions from outside and inside. So that is the two main things is experience and reflection. And there's also a third one component to it, which I call habit. So you have to have a certain continuity to things. It doesn't, it's not enough to have like interesting experiences, could be good or bad experiences, and then reflect on it. You have to continuously doing that in order to stay flexible or plastic, if you want to be more in the brain science arena. And I think that those three components are what we need to make successful learning, at least in the adult section. But I think a lot can be also adapted to educating children and young adults.
I really like that direction with it. From both answers, specifically the learning how to learn focus and this idea of experience being essential to the process. I mean, that's when we are children, that's what play is, right? It's a simulation of experiences that we're trying to prepare for. That's all games are, just a simulated experience. And so I like that ends up being the focus. And actually this learning to learn is the first of 7 core competencies that's used in the Finnish educational system. It's sort of the focus actually of several systems. But on that point, what do you think would be the best way to transform sort of more formal educational systems to reflect the world we're living in, to reflect the changes that are happening? If it were up to you.
If I were like the king of education, I truly believe that it's also, transformation is another buzzword. And I truly become, as you said in the introduction of your podcast, we probably need more rebels, more revolution and that kind of thing. So what we currently see here, at least in Germany, in the education system, there is some willingness to transform, but I think the whole system is so messed up at the moment, and it's so like over the decades and all the time in there, it's so ingrained. It's really hard to transform it. So I would redesign it from scratch. So I would know, if you take everything we know, take it like all the experience, all the good examples. Finland is of course one example, but there are many charter schools in the US, many universities, maybe also schools like Alexandra's example, maybe a little bit of ShiftSchool as well. So we have a lot of good examples on how to do that. Look at MIT and all the creative stuff they've done there, and a lot of research as well. So I think we have all on the table. Everything is on the table. We have a lot of research, a lot of science supporting playful experiences, learning in different ways, but we just are not able to implement it. So I would take all those learnings, get like a few smart people on board. A very diverse set of people. Should be craftsmen and women, should be scientists and also entrepreneurs, and redesign that from scratch. And I think the basic education system that I would probably design would have like maybe 6 or 7 years of elementary school in it, where, you know, pupils learn the basic foundations, reading, writing, you know, in a playful manner. And then I would probably, since I'm quite aware that teenage or puberty is conflicting with education, I would probably have send all the kids out on a more practical mission for 2 years and learn a craft and socialize with people. So it's more like an internship for 2 years, and then I would send them back to school in a system that is probably closely to the Finnish system now, something that is more project oriented, where you can just follow your strengths, your path, but you can also try out and experiment many things. And then of course I would design that into the future, that a learning system is something that is really designed to be a lifelong endeavor. So it's not about going to high school and then to university and then to work. I would design as a system where you maybe work for a few years and then have some learning sabbaticals in between, where you can reform it and question your learning and maybe reorient in a different direction, along with micro learning on the job. I think we all have to do that more. But I also see a future where we have every maybe 3 to 5 years, a longer period where we have the time to reflect and really deep dive into new areas, along with the stuff that we have to learn on, like being in a job anyway. Yeah, that is what I imagine for the future, or hope we can design the future. But I have great doubts that we'll see that in a transformative process, because I've lost faith in politics, at least here in Germany at the moment, that we see anything that goes near that in the near future.
Yeah, there are countries, Tobias, that are in a much worse position at the present moment. I'm thinking of a particular country I'm living in at the present moment. So I love what you said. When are we going to start?
When or where?
When?
Well, I guess, yeah, that is the good question, is always how are we going to implement that? There are many great ideas and many discussions, and that is the big entrepreneurial question, isn't it? Really execute on great ideas. And that's basically why I founded ShiftSchool, and that's why I ended up working with adults. And the reason I really think that working with kids is more fruitful, and it does make more sense to educate kids in the right way, so you don't have to re-educate adults later. So it's way more efficient to start with kids. However, I'm a rebel, and I don't have a lot of patience, and I don't want to deal with government regulation systems anymore. And that's why I ended up working with adults, because I can do whatever I want with adults. And so they come here freely, and I don't have to be regulated or accredited or whatever and deal with all that stuff. That's why I chose to work with adults, I guess, because I really value my personal freedom, and trying to do what I believe in a network with people that I think are the best people to teach other people, and not because they have a formal education or are accredited or are state whatever funded or whatever that there is. And that's the trouble when you're working with kids. You have those regulations, and there's no way around that, at least not in the country I'm living in. And that's why I chose to work with adults, I guess.
I want to bounce back on the adult part. Now, the regulations, there's the good, there's the bad, because you could be creating an amazing program for kids and others could come up with the worst program that you can imagine. But it is frustrating to have to go through bureaucracy to sort of innovate and create new things, because innovation and bureaucracy, they are at the extreme, at completely different extremes. Innovation is on one end and bureaucracy is on the other end. But I want us to dig deeper into this adult education part, and I want to make it as practical for the people who are listening to us. So let's say I am a professional who has increasing responsibilities. The world around me seems to collapse, which is probably the case of most professionals in 2021. How can I best navigate through the uncertainties that surround me as a person, as an individual?
Yes, great question. And the first answer, or simple answer to that is, and I think you have mentioned that before in the discussion we had before starting this, is as we shouldn't worry so much about content, because there is an abundance of content out there. And even now in the pandemic and COVID, there is an explosion of bad content, but also good content. So every festival, every academy, every school, every university is sending their the content online, and it's all available. So we have books, we have podcasts, we have MOOCs, we have other kinds of videos, TED Talks, you name it. There is so much out there. So we don't need more content, but we need something else. We need a framework to cope with that and be able to learn. And I think that is what we're trying to build at ShiftSchool. The moment that's the Shift Shape framework that we have built. And that basically, that framework consists of 5 pillars. And I think we need, first of all, safety. We need a room where people can freely experiment and try things out and talk about their weaknesses, shadows, failures, and also their fears. And that's what people usually don't have in company cultures. Nobody can really open up. At least I've seen so many transformation programs, and I've run so many strategic workshops in companies where that hardly is the case for many reasons. So safety is the first. The second one is what I call inspiration. So you need not like more content, but you need some kind of curation. You need somebody that can point at things and curate things, but not only in telling you more and more and more and giving you more on into your bucket list. But I think it's the exact opposite. Inspiration for me is less is more. It's more like deep focused on certain topics that somebody that is really into that can curate, and should be not only one person but more persons. So less is more in that curating sense makes a lot of sense for me, because we all feel overwhelmed in that educational arena, because there is so much content and more every day. And it's also inspiring in that sense that we need something that is outside of our filter bubbles. I think we all live in certain echo chambers, and we only see and learn what is in that. Especially if you go into the innovation arena, there's a lot of good stuff, but we also need to be confronted with the exact opposite in the world outside of our bubbles. And I think that is a job of a good learning curator as well, to confront people with opposing opinions, with something that is not in their everyday life. So that's why I, for example, oppose something like Netflix for education, where an algorithm is suggesting like even more content into the same direction to specialize you in a certain direction. I think we need the exact opposite. And so that is the second part. The third part is continuity. I've mentioned that before. I think we really need a lifelong learning approach. So we need to really put people in the position to really constantly learn. And the fourth pillar is community. So I truly believe that learning is a social endeavor. Of course, we can read books alone. We can look at videos and even have MOOCs and stuff. But I think a big reason why e-learning is failing, because it's not really social. We need other people, no matter if it's remote or live face-to-face learning. We need other people. We need the exchange. We need to compete and battle in a good sense. We need to discuss. We need that what I call creative discourse with people. So we really need to fight for the best ideas in a social setting. So that is the fourth pillar. And the fifth is what I call dedication, but dedication is maybe a little misleading. I think we need school has to offer some kind of deadlines and accountability. We need to hold people accountable. Otherwise, they will drift off. It's the same with going to a gym. A personal trainer that is holding you accountable is crucial for success. And it's the same with learning. So we need teachers, we need systems and frameworks and also other peers so that we hold each other accountable, so we can really create ownership. And ownership is personal responsibility and group accountability in a nutshell. So that's the thing that we need, I guess.
It's interesting. So your background, you went from being an anthropologist, you mentioned before our chat, to becoming an entrepreneur, a startup guy, someone running a school. Tell me, how has that transition been for you? Your background in anthropology and your previous studies, how has that impacted your perspective on multidisciplinary learning, for example?
I think you probably all know that famous commencement speech by Steve Jobs, where he's mentioning the connecting the dots. And I think that is true, especially in my case, because like in hindsight, I can now see that this is all connecting together. So the branding, the marketing, the storytelling, also the anthropology and gaining empathy and really diving and understanding other people and designing stuff that is useful for people. Also the entrepreneurial part, the digital part, it all neatly fits together. So I think, I ended up building a school for a reason. And that reason is because I've always had that basic urge to learn. I don't know if you guys have, did you ever do the Clifton Strength Finder test? Do you know that one? And there's one thing, of course, there's a lot of future and strategy and all those strengths in there in my case, but learning is like the top part always. So I was always an eager learner, but I didn't know what to do with it. So I was always interested in so many many disciplines. And I just had a meeting this morning with a carpet dealer, a Persian rug dealer. And I was like interviewing him on how to make those rugs and import that kind of stuff. And so I was we were basically talking about different stuff. And he was more about digitization and e-commerce and stuff like that. When I ended up asking him more questions than the other way around. But that's why the way I am. I can even stop people on the street and they have to explain what they're doing on that construction site because I'm so curious by nature. So I think it's not an accident that I ended up building a school, but I think all the different episodes in my life helped me to gain that multi-perspective thing, because I think learning and teaching is not, it's more, it's a mix between an art and a craft, and there is no academic approach to it only. I think there is a lot of what artists do, and we do work a lot with artists in ShiftSchool, and it's not so much a science, it's more about trying and experimenting with different things and trying things out and see what works and what doesn't. And I think that's what that kind of attitude I've acquired over the years, but it took me a long time to get there.
But the journeys that are more complex usually, and I also say that from experience, are very enriching in the sense that you can gather a lot of different experiences, a lot of different insights. You get the chance to discuss with people from a variety of different backgrounds, different countries, different perspectives. And instead of walking down the beaten path, you create your own. And creating one's own path is always going to take more time than going down a path that has already been established for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So in that sense, the complexity is, perhaps it makes it longer for anyone to reach a goal, but it also makes it more interesting and more appealing and more enriching, both personally and then collectively once this person starts sharing those insights and sharing those experiences. And I think this is perhaps both an advantage and a curse for any polymath, because polymaths usually they are interested in so many different topics. But to become an expert in any given topic, you need a lot of time. You need 10 years to become really an expert in said topic. So for a polymath to engage in so many different directions, it takes a lot more time to really dig as deep as one would love, as one would like, while still carrying that diversity. So it can be frustrating at times. We might get back and think, oh, it took me a lot of time. Yes, of course it took me a lot of time, because I was interested in so many different things, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's something a contradiction, Tobias, that I want to point out at, and we haven't discussed it here yet, but we have discussed it previously, which is your love for the word didactic, which can be often perceived as, rigid, old-fashioned, condescending, whatever it is. And then facing this word, which is didactic, you have the word, and you've used it quite a few times, experiential. So how do you combine both? Is there a place for the didactic and the experiential, or the other way around? How can it work?
Yeah, that's a good question. Paul, do you ever use that word? Probably not, right? So I was taught by my American and New Zealand colleagues that this word does exist in the language, and I looked it up in Merriam-Webster, but at least Americans never use that word. And since I cannot pronounce methodology very good, so I like the word didactic because it sounds so funny in English. But basically, you can describe it, and I think that's what experiential learning is. I think didactic or whatever, or methodology or whatever you might put in there, or even technology in a sense, in a more literal sense, it is about thinking of how to get the message across. It's not about, there's content, there is information that is going from A to B and back and forth. And I think we have been concerned about content, or maybe even obsessed about content in the past 100 years, and really putting that out. But in an age where content and information is abundant, and just, you need to hit a button and everything, and you have everything at hand, it is more about that, how to convey things and how to design a way of learning, and those experiences and systems and frameworks. And that's what I think didactic, or whatever word you want to use, is about. It's about designing, as a user experience, it's designing learning experiences. And I think, of course, within a good outcome in the end, where a student or a learner learns something new and does something to acquire new knowledge. And I think that is the aim. And the confusion comes in because people basically think it is about once that the learner can retrieve the information that somebody has sent, then this is learning. But that for me is not learning, because it's just storing information in another brain, and you're more likely to forget it soon after the test or whatever. It's more about really struggling. And if you look at learning science, you can see a lot of research that it is always better to let people struggle and put obstacles in their way, so that they not get the master solution or the easy shortcut to the answer. But it's more about struggling, and you learn better when you struggle. So and it is always hard, and learning, it will always be hard, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's painful. It can be a lot of fun to solve riddles and hard things. You just look at, chess and all the puzzles and all that kind of stuff that is really could be engaging. Or in game design, Paul, you probably tell a lot about that, how games work and all that kind of stuff. So I think that is not mutually exclusive. So it is hard, and it always will be hard. And I strictly oppose anybody that is claiming that we can create shortcuts to learning. However, we can design it in a more efficient way, because it can be more fun. It could be more outcome oriented, and not so much about just conveying information from A to B.
Can we say that the connection between didactic and experiential is the journey? That It's not about the outcome, it's not about the result, it's not about knowing or not knowing, it's about going through a process, going through a series of steps and milestones that eventually will lead you to this kind of a holy grail, which is the outcome of learning.
Yeah, I mean, that's as old as mankind. If you look at storytelling, if you look at Campbell's hero's journey, that's, for example, something we're integrating in the new program now. It's always, this going out, call for adventure, then you're struggling within it, then there is some kind of catharsis. Look at the Greek mythology and stuff like that, and you're coming back and then applying that knowledge. It has been that way. And I think we humans, as a species, we are wired like that, and we should design learning accordingly. So it's always a journey. And I'd rather use the word trek in the ShiftSchool sense, because I want to emphasize, I might be a little picky on words sometimes, but journey is more like, people think that it is a fun cruise on a cruise ship, and they don't have to do stuff. And that's why I use trek, because it's hard work, and we will struggle, and we will fall back, and we have fallbacks, and we have crises, and that is good, because that's the way we learn, and that makes us as personalities, and that builds our character. And there is no perfect process. It's always an up and down, and it's probably not one journey, but there are many journeys connected to each other over time. And I think that's what life is. That's what many religions described. I'm an atheist, but if you look at religions and storytelling, and it's all there, and we should integrate it. It's not that hard. It's all there has been there for ages, centuries, millennia.
Thank you for bringing the Greek mythology into this. It's actually quite relevant to the beginning, how Ulysse first starts the book. Ô muse, conte-moi l'aventure de l'inventif. celui qui pille à trois, qui pendant des années erra. So it brought up some good mythology-related memories. So no, I think it's journey is often, yes, misunderstood because we think it's going to be easy, but that's, I think, how learning usually is perceived. We expect it to be easy. We expect to read something once or twice and then immediately understand it or immediately grasp it. Whereas the way we learn best is by really anchoring that knowledge within us. And embracing the journey with, and as you said, the hero's journey, embracing the journey with all the ups and downs and plot twists and difficult moments and difficult challenges and sleepless nights and all of that kind of a tempest of emotions that can be involved in the process of learning. And that is why the games that you talked about and Paul talked about a bit earlier before we actually started the podcast, it's a bit of teasers for you guys. So it's interesting. Why? Because the game, the plot, it involves us emotionally. And when we sit back and watch the screen, we're not emotionally involved. And it makes sense for the learning not to stick around. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at kids, they, like my kids, for example, when it comes to math, they say, what do I need that for? Why do I have to do that? That kind of question, you hear that a lot. And so you'll have to design stuff that affects people, and stories and are one means to do that. So if I see or I get the point why I have to learn that, and then I have the motivation to do it. There are, of course, some other paths that are more immersion, so we can trick people in a positive sense into stuff as well. Sometimes we can force them into the luck. However, I think it is crucial for adults. Adults always want to understand why they have to do stuff, but I think it's also true for kids. Yes. And we need to, and it's not about explaining them what they have to do on a rational level. I think stories and putting them into situations where they can experience why things are important are the best way. That's the highest level of didactics, or the art of designing education.
I knew you were going to use the word.
I did it on purpose now.
I like this way of breaking down that balance between the didactic, between the methodology and the experiential learning, because I completely agree that it's not just like a journey. It's more of an odyssey. And again, that brings us right back to the Greeks. It's something that isn't always pretty, and in the long run, maybe people don't feel like they can get through. And that's part of why I really think it's important for it to be something that is embraced as a lifelong process, where you're not succeeding or failing. It's just that tomorrow you're going to try something a little different, maybe, or work with what works, and ideally broaden your base of experience. I really like that focus. I think it makes a big difference in how we approach learning. So on that note, do you have any advice for people who are considering retraining, maybe changing gears, or otherwise growing to embrace this lifelong learning as adults?
Yeah, and because it is hard, and it can be not dangerous in a physical sense, but of course it can be quite disruptive. And once you started that journey or that track, there's no turning back. And I think that's why a framework is so important. I've mentioned those pillars before. I think everybody could design that in their social environment. So forming a mastermind group, a social community, finding people that hold each other accountable, but also uplifting, in times you're down, in times of crisis, you need somebody to relate to and talk to. It could be a coach, could be a friend, could be many, many different systems, and also seeking inspiration from many sources. So building a diverse network of people that you can learn from is essential. I think you need those ingredients to design your learning system in one way or another. It doesn't have to be a formal setting like in ShiftSchool. You can also design it for yourself. But I think you need some kind of framework, some structure, some guidance. Otherwise, you will be lost in. And of course, you need some kind of a direction towards something. Otherwise, you set out the sails and just going back and forth and zigzagging across the ocean. And I think that's not the point. So you need some kind of direction and some structure, some safety net. And I think then you're free to experiment. And I think you'll see that if you talk to successful entrepreneurs, if you talk to like educators or great educators and many different people, they all tell the same story, and it's the same ingredients. If you look at effectuation, if you look at the hero's journey, if you look at many different things, I think it all, at least in my world, it all neatly fits beautiful together. And that's what we basically did in the new program. So we have been stealing from all different areas. So there's that book, I don't know if you know that, Steal Like an Artist. I don't know if you heard about that one.
Yeah,
I really like that
one.
notion. So it's not about, picking and combining this eclectic way of designing and experimenting with new stuff, adding a little bit of new stuff and taking it out. I think that's necessary. But yeah, you need some framework. Otherwise you get lost. I truly believe that.
In Lebanon, we have Steal Like a Politician. It's a twist to steal like an artist.
That's a different thing. Yeah.
Yeah, very different, very different. Tobias, we have a special section in this podcast that we have called the Rapid Seven. So it's the Rapid Seven because there are 7 questions, and the 7 questions have to be answered real fast. So okay. Rapid 7 makes sense.
Sure. So is that the sequel of the Glorious 7, the famous movie?
Nice.
No.
No.
No, it's the Interchange 7.
Okay, good. I'll give it my very best to be fast, although I'll have trouble with answering fast.
Well, do you want to start this out?
We'll get it started. So, coffee or tea?
Coffee. Yeah. And tea, both.
I like it. Both.
Didactic or experiential?
Experiential.
Describe the future in one word.
Curious.
Describe the present in one word.
Exhausting.
Describe your state of mind in one word.
Open.
Your favorite word.
Didactic.
An inspirational message or advice in no more than 5 words.
Never stop learning. It's 3.
I like it.
More than enough.
Right, that's efficient.
Do you want to add didactic in it?
No. I fired that bullet already, so cannot fire it twice in a 7 setting.
Makes sense. But never stop learning is something that is very powerful, that is very important, and that is something that we need not just to sort of improve on a personal level, on a self-actualization level, but if we want to survive the changes, we have to learn. This is not a luxury anymore. It is an actual necessity.
Yeah, but it's not only about surviving. I mean, it's more about evolving, isn't it? I mean, learning gives me so much energy, and I don't believe in like the general sense of purpose, but I think this going back to the Greeks, to Aristotle and eudaimonia and all that, I think that this is the sense on the meaning of life is evolving and creating a better version of myself and constantly doing that kind of stuff. That's what I think is the essence of all, or at least my essence.
You know, I agree. The meaning of survival is that things are changing so fast. And at some point, the work that we have, the opportunities that are around us, they would require a new set of skills. They would require growth mindset. They would require a lot of adaptability. They would require a lot of emotional intelligence. And if we do not come to develop those skills and those mindsets, I know you don't like mindsets, but if we want to use the word just per se, if we don't come to really nurture all that kind of a toolbox that we have, this human toolbox that we have, we will be quite disadvantaged. So the learning experience, I see it as spanning the entire pyramid of needs, from basic needs, basic survival, because we will be completely disconnected from the world we live in, up until the point where we actually reach a high level of evolution, of personal actualization, of achievement of self.
That is true. I agree. But my former boss used to say everything in front of a but is bullshit. So beware what's coming now. So I would disagree on that a little bit, because I think this survival mode, it is true and I believe it, but I don't think it's the right way, the right didactic on achieving and transformation in people. Because what you accomplish when putting that on the table is that people get afraid and they stall, they're paralyzed, they go into freeze mode, so they don't change at all. So they do the exact opposite what you want them to do. So if you're telling people you need to change or adopt or die, evolve or die kind of approach, people will choose to die. And so I think we should rather build them a bridge towards this can be really fun. That could be a fun journey. I wouldn't lie to them. It's hard and we have setbacks. We have talked about that. But I really think could be a great adventure, and it could be exciting. And really, we have to excite people into learning and not to scare them into learning. That's what I believe.
If we want that
but
creativity.
Basically, the needs are not necessarily things that you need to hate or you need to abhor. So when we talk about a job, which is at the lower side of the pyramid of needs, because you need to have some income, it doesn't mean that you have to abhor the job. It doesn't mean that you have to hate the job. It's something that you actually appreciate and love. So it's not about scaring people off by telling them, if you don't do this, you're going to die. But it's about being aware of what is at risk here and acknowledging that risk and being aware that there is a process that we need to go through in order to become the individuals that, one, we can become, and that, two, we need to become in order to meet the opportunities that will come for us. So it's not from a scaring perspective that this is said. It's more from a hey, we need to have a wake-up call, and this is something that we need to realize, a really strong, powerful wake-up call. At least this is how I see it.
You're both right, but I see absolutely the balance between the two. There does have to be the degree of awareness of the problems, but there also has to be something to stop people from that paralysis, because that fear does stop people from creating. And you need that creative mindset if you're going to be building something new, something that doesn't exist yet, which is what we need. We need to radically change the way that we're looking at things. So awareness of the scale of the problem is absolutely essential. Any scientist will tell you need data. You have to build your solutions to fit the scale of your problems. But doing it in a way that is fun can be done. It can be just as much a pleasant experience as we can make it. And that's just as much in how we work and how we learn as it is in what we work at and what we learn. I like that.
Thank you, Mr. Engineer.
I like that both sides were represented in this, because honestly, that's part of what I founded Time Repair Corporation for, was specifically addressing this fear and lack of creation that comes from it, that paralysis. It stops anything useful from happening. And the number of people who should be in their garages tinkering and making amazing solutions based on everyday problems and the problems that they perceive. If we had that, I think that it would really help us to make that practical future together.
Yeah, thank you for your diplomacy between the two of us here. But
terrible habit.
Yeah, but you're all right, both of you, and I think, but I think awareness is not the problem we are having. We are all aware that our education system don't work. We are all aware that we have to change stuff in the political system, blah blah blah. So there are many discussions about that. But just take the mother of complexity, climate change. We have scientific facts to the fullest. We are all aware of that, and nothing changes, or very little is changing. And so we should be all very scared, and it's just not, there's no immediate threat. Or if we take away that stuff, we get paralyzed as that I'm just a little citizens, I cannot do stuff like that. So that's why we try to follow populist people that take that burden away from us, so we don't have to change at all. So we need new paradigms and new ways of getting people into that. And I think excitement is the better way of doing that. And it's not scaring off is not working in that sense. And I think when it comes to complex problems, we have to, kind of deconstruct them and then really make a positive picture and really excite people into change. And that is hard. The how is always the hardest part. But I think there is no other way in treating that problem.
Well, sometimes one could argue that a bit of fear is actually something that is quite interesting. Not so much that you're crippled on stage. And I take the example of theater. For a few years in my life, I did theater. And you know that feeling behind stage where you have that kind of a ball at the bottom of your heart, in between your lungs, and at the upper side, the upper right side of your stomach. And you start to feel this playing around, and you have this anxiety. But then when you go out there, you realize, sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. You realize that everything else vanishes because you enter a world that is completely different. So having a bit of fear, not so much that it cripples you, but enough to show you how valuable, how important, how precious this is, followed by immediate immersion into that new world that you're part of and that you're designing and that you're creating, arguably can be also another way to look at it. Basically, we're saying the same thing, but just in different ways.
Yes. But I just like to disagree with you. No, but I couldn't agree more. But I wouldn't call it like scare people into. Of course, there's a difference between, you could talk to leaders and upper management in a different way than to the mainstream people. I think there is also a responsibility involved in that kind of stuff. However, I totally get the point that you're making here, and I wouldn't call it maybe not fear, but it's more, I think people need to have, or like quote a fellow anti-fragilist from Lebanon, Taleb. He wrote a book about skin in the game. I think that is a beautiful term. We need people to hold people accountable, and they have to be affected by it, and in order to change, and not by just being out of the system, no matter if it's managers and CEOs not being affected by their doing and wrongdoing at all. So I think that is a term that I could agree with, and we need that. And I'm not talking about having all this nicey hippie-ish excitement kind of thing. So I think there is urgency, and we need to act fast, and we have to be very candid about communicating that. But I think we've done that in many cases, and if that's not enough, we also need some other thing. So I've come to learn, it changed my mind. If you would have asked me like 3 or 4 years ago, I would say, yeah, pressure helps to change, because that's a catalyst for change. But I kind of changed my mind, because if you want sustainable change to be happening, you need a sustainable format, or you need some paradigm or some runway for people to go to some direction. And that is not done by fearing people, scaring people into that. And there's actually a lot of research said that when you're feared and you're afraid and scared of things, you cannot learn at all, because your brain, your reptile mode is on, and you are concerned with survival. That's why I didn't like that word, and not with learning and experimenting.
Well, that is true. When the amygdala starts screaming around like crazy, it's like, danger, danger. Right. It's true that the performance definitely drops. Survival is a very common word in Lebanon, so it's also a bias of my own that I have to recognize because of the current economic situation, political situation, social situation, etc., etc., etc. So it sort of makes sense from a local perspective, but there is a combination of perhaps it's not about scaring people off. It's about having this kind of apprehension / enthusiasm. And usually both go hand in hand. You're afraid of what might happen, but you're also excited about what might happen. And I think these are two, it's like the yin and yang. These are the two parts of the same coin, more or less. And it's one thing that is very important that you have said, and we're getting off topic, but it's fine, because that's what we do. A lot of times we define things as anti-something, and that leads nowhere. So being aware of the danger, of the risk, and so on and so forth doesn't mean that you have to place yourself as anti-something. And this is a pattern that we've been seeing all around the world. It's about being pro something. It's about giving a direction towards something. And I think that in that sense, what you said is absolutely crucial, because we need to go from this idea of I'm anti this, I'm anti that, to okay, fine. What is it that you want? Tell me. Let's work on that, and let's move things forward based on what we come up as solution, as ideas, as suggestions, and so on and so forth.
And that is a good way to connect the two ideas, because as soon as you're anti something, you're not a part of anything except this anti-movement. And if you're working towards something instead, then as you said, you've got skin in the game. You are invested. Your time and energy are going someplace, and there is risk. Maybe it fails, whatever it is you're doing, but that's how learning works. It's a process in which you put time and energy, and if it works, then you retain the information, you grow. So giving people this opportunity to grow while experiencing enough of those problems so that they understand their scope, but not so much of them that they are paralyzed by them. That's the balance that education needs to be able to find. And that's the degree of investment that's absolutely necessary. It's actually, in my opinion, the #1 problem with the North American take on education is it's viewed as a service that is being provided to parents that affects their children. They're buying it, they believe, and they demand to talk to a manager if it's not up to standards. And that's not the case. That's not what education is. No, education is that odyssey, that journey that we've been talking about, that trek in which those students, those children have to be empowered, invested in that education. When they ask, what's this math for? We have to be able to give them an answer that not only puts it into a practical sense, the work the learning that's going to happen, but also that involves them in guiding and really taking ownership of that process. Otherwise,
Exactly.
why would they care?
And you have to learn that from early on. If you don't learn how to take responsibility for your own learning, and you just outsource it to some service provider kind of thing, and you end up feeling entitled, and
Exactly.
that is the problem we're facing right now. I think that's the number one problem that we're seeing, not only in the US, same here.
Yeah.
And I think fixing that is basically the how question. So I was just arguing, we talk a lot about why we have to change, the reasons, and we find many books about that. We also find a lot about the what's and more creative 21st century skills, blah, blah, blah. And that's all true. And I totally agree with that. But the hardest part is the how. How are we going to change people? How are we going to set up that system? And that's what and that's why I criticize many players in my industry, in our industry, is like in education, they shy away from that because it's hard. And
Right.
it's probably not scalable. I truly believe that good education is not scalable in that sense that you just upload an online course and send it out to a million people, which is a good thing. It's content. It could be bad or good, and it's necessary and it's good that it's out there, but that's not education. You must not confuse information with education. And that is, I'm not going to use the D word again, but I think that is the how. That's how are we going to do that? How are we going to achieve our goals? That's the art and the hardest part of it.
Agreed. And in many a way, the industry is not yet ready to have that conversation sometimes, because scalability is convenient.
But
yeah,
that's
it's
why
convenient,
we
and
need-
it's easier to sell a 2-day crash course on digital mindset, and people buy that, and companies spend a lot of money on that. It's a beautiful business model, but it's not going to change the mindset at all. And if you don't ask that question, you never get there. And I think that is one thing. And I think Paul, you also mentioned a point with like this entitlement. I think on the other hand, we also have to communicate that it takes in ShiftSchool, I would say it takes two to play tennis. So you have to communicate. We can set the court, we can put the net, I can bring the balls, I can even invite spectators to give us feedback. But the student, the learner, has to show up on the court, bring her racket, and play with me. If she doesn't participate in that learning process, and it's just said, well, just throw the balls at me and teach me how to learn that in theory, is not going to work. She needs to get on the court and get her hands dirty and try to do that kind of stuff. Enter that hero's journey. Otherwise, there is no game. There's no game in coaching, no game in mentoring, no game in learning. And that is also true. So we need that ownership that you've talked about, Paul, and that is essential. And that doesn't come out of nowhere. We have to tell people for early on that there is no shortcut and no entitlement in that direction.
Exactly. No silver bullet. And this is why we have interchange, is to reach out to and empower as many of those blessed angels of chaos as we can, who are putting in that kind of time and energy to do more than just make something that is information.
Yeah, and that is why we thank you for being with us. We thank you for listening to our endless chatter. We thank you for being angels of chaos and disruptors and misfits and adventurers and Ulysses in your own way. And we thank you for being part of this interchange of our journey and trek and adventure. And we'd love to hear your voice and more of what you have to say and your ideas and your suggestions, so that we can leverage this interchange and cover more topics, cover more countries, cover more ideas, more subjects, and so on and so forth. And of course, Tobias, you were awesome as always. I want to really thank you so very much for joining us and for having this didactic conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. You wanted an angel, you ended up with a devil, but that's what you know what to expect. So you know what. Yeah. Anyways,
As
it was
a
a lot of
material
fun.
scientist,
And
I've got to say they're made out of the same material. So, you know,
true.
we're really putting a lot of judgment
and
on
molecules. That's true. That's true. We'll see. I mean, maybe that's the next episode. We may dive into nature versus nurture and stuff like that. So we'll need a lot more Zoom cloud space to finish that off.
Yeah, Angels and Demons edition.
Yeah, it's more in the spiritual learning. It's also a nice topic that we can ponder on.
Could be. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining. See you again next time.
Bye-bye. Thank you.